Cape Ann Report, and I'm your host, Maureen Aylward. Our topic is Gloucester Charter Review. Here with me as guests, I have Meredith Fine, the Treasurer for 21st Century Gloucester, Ruth Pino, the Chair of 21st Century Gloucester, and Joanne Senos, the City Clerk of Gloucester. Welcome to Cape Ann Report.
Hi, Maureen. Thanks for having
us. It's great to have you on such an important issue, the Gloucester Charter Review. I guess my first question to the three of you is, what is the Gloucester Charter and why does it need to be reviewed? So who wants to take that one? Meredith?
This is the Gloucester City Charter, or a reasonable facsimile of it. It's the Constitution of the City of Gloucester. It's the document that governs how the city is governed. And so it lays out the form of government, in our case, mayor, city council, and school committee, and then lays out what their powers are, and then in some minute detail, how the government is run. And so this is the city charter. Somebody else can talk about, if they want, why we need to review it.
Well, you're running 21st Century Gloucester, which is a committee that you've created to jumpstart this city charter review?
Well, we should always be looking at how our government is structured and how it represents us, everyone who lives here and votes here and pays taxes here. And to look at it comprehensively based on today's needs and having a vision for the future. So it was just time. It was done 40 years ago and done again 35 years, 30 years ago, and we just need to do it again.
So what's driving you? What's the driving force behind the two of you and why you're here to talk about the charter? I know that it's necessary to review it, and it sounds like it's time with all these decades going by without a full revision process. But why do you think that it's important to do this right now? I know it needs to be updated technology-wise, but what's the driving force? Do you think, for our viewers, what will help them to understand why this is such an important thing to do?
Well, because it's such a long process, which is mandated by the state, and I'm sure Joanne can speak to that.
Joanne, you're next.
Someone has to do it. I kept hoping someone would step forward in the last 5 or 7 years, and it just haven't happened. And I think it's somewhat intimidating to think about the process of even getting the question on the ballot this November, and the process of a charter commission being elected, and then the process of public review, and then how it happens 3 years later to get it on the ballot, any recommended changes. So you just have to start. You have to start the process.
Yeah, you have to start the process.
But I do want to say that this is, I just want to say a few words about Ruth. She and I were at a city council meeting, just as we do, and she turned to me one night and said, I want to do something about the charter. And I said, all right, I'm in. We didn't really understand what we're doing. But I just want to say how grateful I am that somebody of Ruth's ability and commitment and vision decided to take this on. She's a former president of the Chamber and the Rotary Club and a respected realtor. Sometimes it feels like she knows every single person in the city, and she's just the right person to be doing this.
Yeah. So the leader, the champion, is what has been needed. Let's talk about the process. I mean, we have Joanne here, Joanne Senos, as the city clerk of City of Gloucester, and the process, as Ruth said, is long.
It's a long process,
and they're just at the beginning of starting the petition to bring a revision forward to the voters. Mm-hmm. What about this process, and why is it so cumbersome, or why is it so long?
Well, it's mandated by the state. So sometimes, as you know, when we go by state law, it's a long, drawn-out process. The petitioning there are charter revision petitions that are provided by the state, and they sent to the city clerk, and then I in turn give them to the committee or the people who are collecting the signatures. Based on Massachusetts law, they would need at least 15% of the last state primary election, which is about 3,300 signatures. Okay. They have up until July of 2019, I believe it's either the 25th or the 26th, to provide us with the signatures. And once they inform us that they no longer collecting signatures and declare that whatever signatures they submitted for certification has ended, then we have 10 days to certify the signatures. And after the 10 days, we turn it over to City Council. City Council has to vote in order to, they have to allow 30 days after they receive the certification of the Board of Registrars to order the ballot, the question on the ballot.
Mm-hmm. And because you are, your job is to do elections in the city, that's why you're so critical to this conversation, because it would be putting a referendum on the ballot for the voters of Gloucester to decide whether or not they want to go ahead with a charter revision, right? And so there's a difference between a charter review, which can be done by
A charter amendment.
And this, which would be a charter revision. So can it doesn't matter who would like to talk about the differences.
So what would be considered a revision, for example, would be to increase the term of the mayor, for example.
This is what you're proposing to do with this petition.
We don't have any proposals into how it should be revised, but I'm just giving an example of the mayor is currently at a 2-year term.
Right.
So the 10-year review process, which is provided for in the existing charter and by the state, couldn't make that kind of change. That kind of change has to happen through this election process, through this public review process. And the public is the one who would say, yes, we'd like to have a 4-year term for the mayor, or staggered terms for the city council, for example, or staggered terms for school committee to prevent what's happened a couple of times in the last 10 years where 5 or 6 members of the city council and or the school committee were new all at the same time. So as an example, if you had staggered terms, that wouldn't happen. But that change cannot take place with just what is called the 10-year review process. It has to go through this other. Yes, it's called a revision process, but our goal is to provide the elected charter commission with the option of revision by reviewing the entire charter.
Right.
We had 2 paths we could have taken. There are 2 ways to revise a charter. One is to go to the state legislature, go through the city council and go to the state legislature and do what's called a home rule petition. That's one way to do it. But we chose the harder way. Getting the signatures is not easy, but we felt very strongly that this is government of the people, by the people. This is the most transparent way to do it, where we go out, we involve the community. As Ruth says, a charter commission of 9 people will be elected to review the charter. We'll all be open, all be local, and that's how we felt it should be.
So instead of it being the decision concentrated in the city council, the mayor, and then the state rep taking it to the state legislature to be approved, changes that wanted to be revisions to the charter, this opens it up to the voters, which is, of course, what everybody really wants.
Right.
Right.
And it really gives all 20,000 registered voters the opportunity to have their voices heard with the 9 charter commission members and they could actually affect some change.
So could we talk about the 9-member?
Could I just add?
Yes, please.
Okay. Also, I just want to mention under the city charter, section 10.1, every 10 years they're required to do to have a charter review and through the O&A committee, and also propose any amendments. And they could be small amendments by changing a title of an office, or requirements which have in 2011 when that took effect was adding electronic email on like the annual report instead of publishing in a local newspaper, the full report, anything that's adopted, or also we could use the alternative as posting it on our website, and that would satisfy that requirement. So it is reviewed every 10 years on the year ending 0, but they're minor amendments.
They're minor amendments, but it helps to keep the process moving.
Yes.
To fix things and to update.
Yes.
It sounds like it's a good time to update and create these amendments. But as we've been talking about, this is a totally different type of action.
It opens the options to a charter commission to make real change.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Charter Commission, this 9-member committee or commission, that it would be elected by the people via this ballot in 2019. Is that how it works?
Let me go back for a second, if I may. So there are 2 local elections that matter here. November 19, which is this coming November, we would have a ballot question that says, do you want to review the charter? And at the same time elect 9 commission members.
Oh, so that would be done at the same time on the November 2019
and
ballot.
And then the revisions, if there are any, we don't know, but if there are any revisions to be proposed by the commission, then that would be on the ballot of 2021. And so when Ruth talks about Ruth and Joanne talk about what a daunting process is, when we first started and we realized how daunting it was, we were like, wow, 4 years is a long time. But for Ruth and me, we're only seeing it as a 2-year process for us, that we just want to, we and all the volunteers who are helping us, we just want to get the review question on the ballot. We would like to see 9 qualified people run. I'm sure more will run. And then she and I are done. We've done our part. And then it's up to the commission to hold hearings. They would hold hearings. Presumably they might hire a consultant. And then whatever they propose would have to go first to the state for review. A couple of state agencies would have to review. Would the Attorney General have to review?
The Attorney General in the Department of Community and Housing.
Right. So go to the state for review, a preliminary report, and then the commission would keep having hearings. It would all be very open. And then a final report would be mailed to every household, every registered voter's household
Yes.
in the city. And then in 2021, and then there would be a vote.
What would a public hearing address, for instance? What would this...
I worked for the Charter Commission back in the early 1970s, and it's really open. You know, people just come and say, here are my ideas. There's no set agenda. The Charter Commission would not say, here's what we want to do. What do you think about that? They are saying to the public, we want your ideas. We want you to come forward and tell us what you think the city charter should look like, and what are maybe some of the things that you've observed or you've been involved in that you thought could have been done better, and how do you propose that could work? And then the Charter Commission deliberates, and obviously we've elected them to make good decisions, but then the final decision is up to us as voters in the end to say yes or no to their recommendations.
So that election in 2021 would have the revisions on the ballot so that voters could look and see what they would be voting on. And that those revisions would be decided in the public hearing, the public forums, and reviewed by the commission.
I would anticipate spirited debate.
Spirited debate.
I think I'm hoping for a really wonderful discussion about how the city runs, what's the best Gloucester government to have. People will have strong opinions, I'm sure they will. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But we've had a number of people thank us for doing it, because it is daunting a bit to take this on because of the number of signatures we need just to get it on just to get the idea of review on the ballot.
But it should be hard.
Otherwise,
frankly,
I think it would happen more often.
Yeah, it should be hard to change the government.
It should be hard to change the government,
Right, because
which
you
is
don't
the
want,
reason.
every time somebody's angry about something, you don't want them
You
to
don't
be
want
able to
that to
go in
happen
and
either.
reopen the city's constitution.
Right.
So it should be hard. And I have to say, and I don't know if you've had the same experience, But I haven't really had, the people who've been signing the petitions, they get it. People are like, oh yeah, give me where do I sign? I mean, this is.
So when you would bring it up, the Gloucester Charter Review, people are saying, yes, we need to review the charter.
They really are.
We need to get that happening. Regarding voters, people who are signing the petitions that are out and about in the community right now, right?
We've got about, what do you think, 25 volunteers?
Mm-hmm. There's active solicitation of signatures on these petitions, so they're out there. But Joanne, you have an important piece around voter registration and voters who are thinking about signing this petition.
Yes, like every voter needs to vote, register to vote at a particular address that they choose to. And then what happens is that when they move and change their address, they don't usually inform the city for their voter registration. They might inform the city for other matters. So what happens is that when these volunteers go out for signatures, we have signatories who sign at an old address, but they've actually moved, or a new address, and we can't match that up with the voter. So we have to disqualify that signature. So it's kind of important when you do have a change of address. The post office does not inform us, and it doesn't qualify for us to change your address. We need a live signature, which is given the permission of the voter to change the address for the voting list. And in one way, voters can check their address where they're registered to vote at it if they haven't voted recently through the Secretary of State's office. That will show your voter registration address and also your political party, which doesn't apply to this charter revision. There's no need of that. And also to the city clerk's office. You can come in or you can give us a call and we can look you up on the system. So that's what usually disqualifies some of the signatures of not being certified because of the incorrect address.
Great. And so you're aiming for 3,600
3,600, 4,000 in there.
signatures. And how many do you have now?
Well, we have more than 1,000. We haven't turned them all in yet. But our hope was to end the year with at least 1,000. And then that would be a big dent. And now here we are in the dead of winter. And so it's not that easy. We're not going to stand at the train station or in front of Demoulas and collect signatures at the moment. But for example, we organized people for the Middle Street Walk, and we got a really good number of signatures there. We're going to be organizing people to go to hockey games and basketball games to kind of harvest signatures. I mean, I don't know about you. I've worked through all my friends and relatives already. So we're lucky. We're having, can I mention Matt? A young man named Matt Murray has been really helpful because his career is in politics. And so he's been really helping us get organized and keeping track of everything and moving us forward and sending out encouraging notes.
Good experience.
Yeah.
Right? For any young person to be going through the process and being part of it, I would imagine.
So people have been great. And like I said, we have about 20, 25 volunteers who've taken petitions and carrying them around. And
League of Women Voters.
Go ahead.
The League of
Women Voters has agreed to step in and help us with this process because it's not partisan. It's really about looking at the government as a whole. And yes.
Joanne, did you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to make a suggestion that the YMCA on Saturdays is very busy. So if anybody wanted to go in there, because I
just rejoined. So.
Good point.
Because on Saturday mornings, that is
that's a really good idea.
Influx of people going in and out if you wanted to get signatures.
That's a fantastic idea. Thank you.
What kind of reaction are you getting? I know that we talked about the positive reaction, but I'm wondering about the natural skepticism that people would have in relation to a charter review, if they might not necessarily be educated or understand the process. So, what kind of
I think
how are you dealing with other kinds of reactions?
I actually haven't had any negative reaction whatsoever, but I have had some of the volunteers tell me that they've had people question them. What's the motive? Who's behind this? What is it you want to change? And that's not the conversation. And so they're just saying, no, it's time. It's about looking towards the future and just looking at our form of government and how we're governed to make sure it's in the best place it should be.
Mm-hmm. Also, I've had people ask me, what's your agenda? What's really going on here? And to a certain extent, I feel a little sad that they don't believe that people can just really do this
without an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But I also think too, given the terrible atmosphere that we have today politically, mm-hmm. And I'm not saying one way or another, but I think it's objectively true that there's a very bad feeling about politics. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the city to engage in civic growth together and to be really positive and to see that they really matter, that what they want can happen, and that if people work together, they can get something that's better than what we have now. Even if you like what we have now, it can always be better.
Mm-hmm. And that segues beautifully into, after I started this process with Meredith, I was asked to be one of the tri-chairs for the Gloucester 400 celebration. And that describes exactly what our mission is from the Gloucester 400. Gloucester will be 400 years old in 2023. And it's possible that any revisions to the existing charter would happen in the election that takes place in 2023. So that wasn't the goal, to have it all come together at the same time, but how perfect is that?
Right.
So it's a really positive way of looking at, it doesn't mean change, it just means it's including all of the citizenry of Gloucester into this process of looking at our government and how we're governed, and in participating in the celebration of Gloucester in 2023.
Right, because it's so vital to be able to participate in the process. And you feel better when you're participating in the process. And what a great culmination. It would seem to me in November, towards the end of the year, considering the 400 celebration is going to go on all year long, that would be a wonderful thing.
It's a 365-day event, if I may say so.
365
And just to say, our website's being launched over the weekend, and stay tuned.
And where can viewers find out more information about this? We
have a Facebook page called 21st Century Gloucester, and folks are invited to read it. We have some material on there explaining what a charter is and how to change it.
Can they contact you through that website?
They can contact us, and we have an email address that I haven't checked in a while called gloucesterforward@gmail.com. And
people can sign up to
Ruth's phone number is, I think, is on some of that literature.
Yeah. So people can sign up to be volunteers for petitions and go out and get signatures.
Please.
And also learn more about the process and how things can change. One more question about what's possible in terms of the day-to-day working of the city. The revision can look at term limits, like the mayor at 2 years or moving it to 4 years, eventually, of course. But there are some day-to-day issues that are sometimes inhibited through the current Gloucester Charter that might be opportunities for revision. Do you have some examples of that?
Well, if I may, the Charter can get very detailed. And by the way, it is available on the city's website under the city's website.
We'll put that up there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll have it run.
But let me give you a couple of examples. The city attorney is required by the charter to be a full-time city employee. And some years ago, I can't remember how many, but the mayor at the time wanted to hire a firm called Kopelman and Page to be the city's attorney. Kopelman and Page is an extremely well-known municipal law firm with all kinds of expertise and experience. But the city charter didn't allow it. So now we have we have a full-time city attorney. He's a very good attorney and a terrific fellow. But he has to hire consultants to do what Kopelman and Page could have done for the city. And so that's one of those areas where it seems small, but it would have been so much more efficient for the city to at least have the option
That's the key.
of hiring a firm.
Yeah.
Another example, and then I'll stop. There are a number of department heads who have to be approved by the city council every 2 years. I guess I can kind of see that. But, for example, the building inspector has to be approved by the city council every 2 years. Why? Why is that? That seems unnecessary. And I think that our building inspector is doing a terrific job. Why would any building inspector have to worry about every 2 years having to reapply for their job to the city council? There must have been a good reason for doing it then, but I don't see the reason for doing it now. The city charter is full of things like that.
And this is where the public hearings are so important, so that the public can bring these issues forward to say, you know, if I've had issues with this, and this is in the city charter, and you know, I can talk. It'll be that listening session that's necessary.
Well, and let me just say one more thing. So I'm an attorney, and I do a lot of permitting in the city. I do a lot of work with the city. So many of the reasons that the public gets frustrated with the city, they think it's the people, but it's actually the documents.
It's the document.
The zoning ordinance, the city has hired, to their credit, a consultant to come and look at the zoning ordinance, which is really got a lot of inconsistencies. So many of the city's documents are out of date, inconsistent, poorly written, and this is one of them. And so we're looking at the zoning ordinance, we're looking at so many of the other ordinances, we should look at this one.
I do want to mention, too, that the city auditor and the city clerk, even though they're under the city council, gets reappointed every 2 years also.
So,
And from an administrative perspective, the administration of a business, and the city is a business, has certain jurisdiction over their employees. And so to have to be approved by a legislative body just makes no sense. I mean, it's just another example. It's not all about the elected officials. There's a lot of sections of the charter that need to be looked at from today's perspective, not from the perspective of 25 years ago or 40 years ago.
Perfect.
yeah, it's a really important issue, and thank you for being on Cape Ann Report to talk about it. I'm looking forward to having you back to give us an update on how the petitioning is going. Joanne Senos, a city clerk for City of Gloucester, Ruth Pino, chair of 21st Century Gloucester, Meredith Fine, treasurer, 21st Century Gloucester. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me on Cape Ann Report. Until the next time on Cape Ann Report, take care.